I wanted to speak to the issue of transparency, popular issue with you, Councilwoman Mason, and where exactly the origins of this rewritten rent control ordinance come from. As I mentioned before the meeting, Councilwoman Mason, I had sent you 4 emails that weren't responded to and wound up publishing a letter in the Reporter. Again, no response. What my emails and letter were about was about something that I just happened to catch on Channel 78 as I was channel surfing one night. It was a council meeting. It appeared to be very late in the evening, and it was September 15th. I think that was a version of this rent control ordinance, this rewritten rent control ordinance. Councilman Bala and Councilwoman Marsh said, well, we really can't talk about this right now because we just received this ordinance at 4:30 this afternoon. Councilwoman Mason, you were passing along a manila envelope. You passed it along to City Clerk Farina and indicated you wanted to pass it along to Mr. Case, our then lawyer. Councilwoman Marsh asked you, what is that? You said, that's Miles Square Taxpayers Association's response to the rent control ordinance. Councilwoman Marsh asked you, are you saying that Miles Square Taxpayers Association saw that ordinance before we did? You said, well, let me back up for everybody. The committee has been working in a very open and transparent way. You went on, but you never really answered the question.
Can I interrupt a second?
Sure.
Are you going to comment on this ordinance?
I think I'm commenting on it. I'm wondering where it came from, because it looked to me like it was written by Miles Square Taxpayers Association, and you were making sure that their response, not me, a constituent of the Second Ward, you're making sure that this small group of landlords and developers get their response passed along to the lawyer. Most of the people who live in the Second Ward are tenants. I'm just wondering, did they see the ordinance before people on the council?
There's a number of comments on that part, but that's not why we're here. We're here to have comments on this ordinance.
Well, my comment
what you
is...
see, pardon me.
Okay.
What you may or may not see is working for you or not.
Well, what I see is looking like this ordinance was written by a small group of special interests. Okay, that's my comment.
Misadministration issues, which are the supposed basis for MSDA legal actions. And I'm concerned that the amendments do not meet these specifications. I'm just going to go through a few things I've seen here. First, I notice there's a whereas clause that notes that the work of the committee is ongoing and intended to address other issues. I'm very concerned with the concept that you're going to do a few things now and then a few things down the road and steadily, step by step, at this rate the ordinance. Specifically, I'm now going to what you've actually written. Your 2-year session with reference to the 2-year session limitations and the 2-year period proposed. One sentence, of course, that really strikes me as a refund and or credit of excess rent shall be barred if the tenant's request for legal rent calculation is not made within 2 years of the start of his or her tenancy. there's some problems here. First, any tenant whose tenancy began more than 2 years before the passage of this ordinance automatically loses his or her right to refund of excess rents altogether. 2, the tenant is deprived of all excess overpayment beyond the last 2 years. For example, a 20-year tenant may be deprived of refunds for 18 years of overpayment. 3, this barring of refunds appears to...
What was the second one? I missed it.
What? And it's just the general idea that a 2-year period of repose where you can only get 2 years back. If a tenant has already been living there for 20 years, then they lose 18 years of overpayment refund. So you're knocking out a lot of the money that they have lost because of the fact that the law has been broken. 3, this barring of refunds appears to implicitly leave the rent at the illegally high value. If rent calculation is done more than 2 years after the beginning of the tenancy, thus, for example, any tenant whose tenancy began more than 2 years before the passage of this ordinance automatically loses his or her right to have a legally high rent lowered to the legal rent, as well as losing all right to a legal rent refund. So it's not just that you lose the refund, it seems to allow that rent, that illegal rent, to persist. This is a serious problem with this ordinance. 4, we object to only 2 years for a tenant to ask for a rent calculation and only 2 years repayment. A proper disclosure statement, and I have some references to that, because you do address this somewhat. A proper disclosure statement is required for any reasonable statute of limitations on receiving refunds, but we do not agree to a period of repose that is a limit on repayment, especially for existing tenants. I mean, obviously, if you have a statute of limitations for a brand new tenant, that imposes a period of repose. But an existing tenant who may have been overpaying for 20 years, this 2-year limit on overpayments is just basically a rip-off. We have proposed a possible solution, which you have addressed somewhat, but I don't think adequately, which is alternative proofs of legal rent increases, and that at least has the good quality that if all the rent increases were legal, but just there's some documents missing, and you can prove that in a very verifiable way, then that may be a solution to the misadministration problem. With regard to disclosure, there's a problem. The disclosure statement does not verify that the rent stated in the included copy of the registration statement on file with the Rent Regulation Office is legal. Indeed, the very fact that the disclosure statement is given to the tenant suggests that the rent in the registration statement is legal, thereby making it unlikely that a tenant would apply for a legal rent calculation. There should be, in any kind of disclosure statement, first, a notice that the registration statement may not have the statement may not have a verified legal rent stated in it, that the rent stated may not be legal.
5 minutes.
I'll say the rest then.
Okay, well, just,
I'll just put it on my time. I'll take the sheet.
well, wait a minute, just let me get to the end of the sentence, please.
Okay, finish up then.
Okay, sorry. I kind of lost one. Okay, yes, I'm talking about things that should be in registrations, the disclosure. A notice that the registration statement may not have verified legal rent. A notice that the legal rent can only be determined through a legal rent calculation by the rent leveling office. 3rd, instructions for how to apply for such a thing. 4, a warning that if you do not, you being a tenant, do not apply for a legal rent calculation, you will lose your right to any refund or of overpayment. 5, the rent should be adjusted to the legal value at the time it is determined by the rent leveling office, regardless of when it is done, regardless of expiration of the statute of limitations. Okay, I was going to get into a couple other things.
If Cheryl, Estelle, would,
When I go, I don't want
free to submit it in writing if you'd like.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
I wanted to
yeah.
get it, I just wanted to get it on the record so that you all can have a.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We'll take it in writing if that's, if you're.
Well, I will, obviously, I'm going to do that, but I just wanted to don't have that much to say.
Dan, the only reason is we do have a number of other speakers, and we only have 20 minutes left in the meeting.
Okay, well, then you can, Cheryl, you think you'll have time to do it?
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
And we hope that will watch the time for,
I believe the next speaker is Kathy Cardillo.
I've already,
Here, Dad just pointed it.
this makes it, I know you this is fine.
So that way we can make sure everybody hears you.
He's a little tired, but it's
I've already submitted something to the subcommittee in writing and to council. I just want to highlight a couple of things, not necessarily what's in writing, but to address what's already been said. It is important, as one landlord said, to notice the distinction between the Anti-Eviction Act tenants and the summary dispossession tenants. Not because the landlords in that case deserve more freedom from rent controls, but that these tenants need more of their protection. For example, in the existing rent control ordinance, it says you can't have a vacancy fee control if you evict these tenants, right? So, because under the Summary Dispossession Act, you can evict for no cause. And they want to make sure that tenants weren't being evicted just to get 25% vacancy controls. So there is important here because these tenants actually need more protection than the other tenants do. Now, there's a lot of claims here about seniors and people forced to sell, and it all sounds very sympathetic, but where's the statistics? Where is this information that all this is happening? How many appearances have there been before the board saying, I can't make a fair return, I need help, I'm filing a hardship increase? Actually, how many of those have actually happened? What you have here is some landlords who just want to take advantage of Hoboken being a hot town and make more money. Now, nobody here, and particularly those who are financing this, are poor seniors and who need this council's help. Now, there's been I do want to say I agree with some things. The Truth in Renting Act is state law. It does not need to be in this here. Unfortunately, though, all that realtors do is say, acknowledge that you got it and never provide the book. But regardless of that, that's state law. Now, as to the disclosure notice, it really should happen on letting. The same time you sign a lease, the same time you get a disclosure. No problem getting a signature. This is how it should happen. Now, if this then would be a phase-in process in regards to your repose and in regards to your disclosure notice. If you want it to be en masse, then it is a difficulty. You're going to have to do it one time. You clearly don't need to do it with every notice. It's a one-time notice. Because what you need to tell the tenant, which you left out, is that, again, which Dan Thompson raised, is the fact that there is a 2-year limitation. So if you don't have it, you're going to lose it. That's the purpose of the disclosure notice. That's the real purpose of the disclosure notice. There were some allegations that there have been multiple changes in the ordinance and it's found, problems with it. Actually, that's not the case. All the decisions relative to this city and this board and this ordinance all say it's clear and unambiguous. There's not a problem with it. And there is a reason, again, for the certificate. And again, that certificate goes to those tenants who could be evicted for no cause, those tenants who could be coerced out just to get a 25% vacancy control. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't happen that often, but it does happen. And the purpose of that certificate is ensure that that doesn't happen. It tenants are protected. By allowing this dumping of information, comparables, I mean, there's no authenticity to any of this documentation. You're doing away with the certificate. You're really doing away with rent control and allowing the landlord to charge whatever he wants to charge. Because you have no authenticity in any of this stuff. I think it's an overreaction. I'm kind of disturbed that Liberty Utilities will try to pressure you with the class action. Let me just say that the tenants are working very, very hard for you to throw this whole class action out. And so, there's a lot of legal issues I won't get into, but it's not, don't believe everything that's said up here, and you have no statistics in front of you, you have no real proofs in front of you, you have landlords claiming harm in most cases that were bought up by themselves by charging you a rent normally illegal. So on that note, I'm sure I've used that many minutes, but please review what I've written, because I'm sincere in what the news expressions.
We appreciate it.